Apple just filed a lawsuit against OpenAI. In the same week, a report leaked that Apple is designing a new chip that supports up to 1.5 terabytes of memory. One hand fighting a lawsuit, the other building a massive memory chip. Coincidence or strategy? Let's start with the lawsuit. On July 10th, Apple formally filed suit in the Northern District of California, accusing OpenAI of stealing trade secrets. The complaint names two former Apple employees. The first, Tang Yew Tan, spent 24 years at Apple, most recently as VP of Product Design for iPhone and Apple Watch. The second, Chang Liu, was a senior systems electrical engineer with 8 years at the company. In other words, these two have very different profiles. They're nowhere near the same level. The complaint also includes a pretty heavy line, alleging that the theft involved OpenAI personnel at every level, from members of its technical staff all the way up to its chief hardware officer. The core allegation against Liu is that he exploited a rare authentication bug to break into Apple's internal network and download confidential documents. But the wilder part is a separate claim. The complaint alleges that during interviews, OpenAI asked Apple employees to bring actual parts with them for what it calls show and tell sessions. Those parts allegedly included batteries, system-in-package modules, logic boards, and shielding components. In other words, Apple isn't just saying people jumped ship. It's saying OpenAI walked away with hardware know-how and physical components at the same time. And per the complaint itself, more than 400 former Apple employees are now working at OpenAI. Over on Reddit's r/Apple, this story picked up roughly 1,200 upvotes within just a few days, which tells you how much people care. Procedurally, Apple is asking the court for an injunction to stop OpenAI from continuing to use the alleged trade secrets, plus monetary damages. OpenAI hasn't issued a detailed public response yet, and this case has a long way to go. But Apple suing OpenAI doesn't mean it's giving up on AI. If anything, it might be exactly because Apple takes AI so seriously. To understand this lawsuit, you have to go back to 2024. That year, at WWDC, Apple announced it was integrating ChatGPT into Siri and iOS. At the time, the two companies were still partners, but by May of 2025, things changed. OpenAI acquired Jony Ive's hardware company, IO Products, for $6.5 billion. This wasn't just a routine acquisition. IO Products was specifically designing a brand new AI hardware device, not software, an actual physical piece of hardware. It also ranks as one of the largest acquisitions in OpenAI's history. From that moment on, OpenAI's identity shifted. It was no longer just a cloud AI provider. It became a company that wanted to build its own hardware and potentially compete directly with the iPhone. At the same time, Apple's own Siri overhaul kept getting delayed, and the Apple Intelligence brand hasn't exactly launched smoothly, which arguably made Apple feel this urgency even more. Jony Ive himself spent roughly 3 decades doing design at Apple, and it was only after he left that he started working with OpenAI, so his personal weight is a big part of why this deal drew so much attention. Then, just 2 days after the lawsuit, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman revealed a key detail buried in Apple's chip roadmap. Apple is targeting 2028 for the launch of the M7 Ultra, designed to support up to 1.5 terabytes of unified memory. Quick explainer on what unified memory even means. Unlike a traditional PC where the CPU and GPU each have their own separate memory, Apple's architecture has the CPU and GPU sharing one single memory pool, which in theory makes it more efficient for running AI models. Some context first. The current top-tier chip on the market today is the M3 Ultra, capped at 512 gigabytes. The rumored next generation, M5 Ultra, is only targeting 768 gigabytes, and even that depends on whether memory chip shortages allow it. Gurman himself was clear that this is a design capability, not a locked-in confirmed spec. So what does 1.5 terabytes actually mean? In plain terms, it means you could run a model with over 100 billion parameters locally, right on your own computer, no monthly subscription, no relying on the cloud. This news is already a hot topic over on the local Llama community, where the reaction has been pretty enthusiastic. In other words, Apple wants to move a chunk of what used to require cloud AI back onto your own machine. One caveat worth flagging, this is targeting 2028, so there's a lot that could still change, and how the memory chip supply chain evolves will affect whether the final shipping version gets scaled back. So these two stories are really two sides of the same coin. The lawsuit is happening right now, and the signal is that the partnership has broken down and Apple is fighting back. The M7 Ultra is a target 2 years out, and the signal is that Apple is going all in on local AI. In other words, one front is a legal battle, the other is a chip battle. But underneath both, the question is the same one. Should the AI in your phone or your computer live inside OpenAI's cloud or inside Apple's own local system? Big companies suing each other while still competing in the market isn't exactly new in Silicon Valley. This kind of litigation is often a long game, not something meant to resolve overnight. This lawsuit, to some extent, is also a strategic weapon. It can slow down OpenAI's progress in hardware while giving Apple's own local AI time to catch up. Apple's whole pitch has always been that AI should stay on your device to protect your privacy, while OpenAI represents the cloud compute story. Those two narratives are probably going to collide more and more head-on in the years ahead. Some analysts also point out that regardless of how the lawsuit itself turns out, it's already forcing the whole industry to confront a question. If even a giant like Apple feels the need to go this far to protect its hardware secrets, smaller AI hardware startups may find it even harder to stay out of the crossfire. To put it in Wall Street terms, Apple isn't doing this out of charity. It wants you to buy a Mac that might cost close to $100,000, so you never have to pay OpenAI a monthly fee again. Some people on Reddit joked this might end up being the first Mac to ever break the $100,000 mark. This lawsuit is a marketing move. That chip is the actual business model. Apple versus OpenAI. This two-front war. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I'm German. AI Watch. Watch AI. See you next time.